countdown to Kansas City is on November 23rd. The NWSL Championship will take place at CPKC Stadium in Kansas City. You can watch it live on CBS at 8 p.m. Eastern time. And until we get there, Sandra, every Wednesday we are revisiting an NWSL championship. We've started in 2013. We've worked our way all the way up to the 2017 NWSL Final between North Carolina Courage and the Portland Thorns. Ultimately, I'm not spoiling anything here, guys. It happened in 2017. The Thorns win 1-0 on a second half strike from midfielder Lindsey Horan. But in 2017, this NWSL final took place at a neutral site in Orlando, Florida, Saturday, October 14th, 4:30 p.m. Eastern time kick. There's over 8,000 fans in attendance, Sandra. And before we dive into all of it, I have to ask, how much of the 2017 NWSL final did you remember versus how much did you have to rewatch, reread, rethink about before we did today's show?
Oh, I love it. I love this because I think I mentioned in the last episode that from here on out, I can safely say and confirm that I've been to every final
So cool.
since 2016. And honestly, Lisa, I didn't have to go back too much with this one because this one left a mark on me, as I'm sure it left a mark on many players, because I remember the physicality in this match. We're talking hyper physical game between these two teams. I'm grateful that I decided to take this game in kind of in the stands versus in the press box. Shout out to my friends Chelsea and Ellie, who hung out and seen it, but I could still remember some of the smacks of challenges because of where we were sitting at the time, and it wasn't pretty. It really wasn't pretty. And I think there was maybe a layer of kind of, I don't want to say disappointment, but this was billed so high. It was hyped up, rightfully so, because we're talking about number one team versus number two team. Surely we're going to get some soccer here. And there was a little bit, but there was mostly fisticuffs.
Oh my gosh, it was so intense. Rewatching this on YouTube. So shout out to the YouTube for always having the full replays of these games, because that's how I prepare for these episodes. And it is so fun, Sandra, to take a trip down memory lane and watch these games.
The time machine is YouTube.
The time machine is YouTube. But it was a physical battle with, frankly, only 3 cards in this game. Like, it's not like there was yellow cards and red cards coming out left and right. It was just physical, the intensity. I mean, you can see it on these players' faces. Let's go back and talk about how North Carolina and Portland got to the final. So, first of all, you might be like, wait, North Carolina, they weren't there in 2016. Yes. Western New York Flash had been relocated from Buffalo, New York to Cary, North Carolina, and renamed the North Carolina Courage. So that same group of players and team, despite being in a new location, having a new crest and a new name, were the reigning NWSL champions in 2016. We had forward of the New York Flash, and now she was on the North Carolina Courage in 2017. Jess McDonald relived that with us last week, but that same group and team continued their dominance. So North Carolina in 2017 won the NWSL Shield, so they finished first with 16 wins, 1 draw, 7 losses. It was forward Lynn Williams as the team's top goal scorer. She had 9, so she was 5th in the league in goals, but she also led the team with 5 assists. Meanwhile, Portland Thorns, they finished second in the regular season in 2017, 14 wins, 5 draws, 5 losses. And the Thorns were led by Christine Sinclair as their forward with 8 goals. And defender Megan Klingenberg led the team with 6 assists. And she was second in the league with those 6 assists. In the playoffs, it was just the top 4 teams that advanced to the semifinals. Saw North Carolina Courage take on the Chicago Red Stars in the first semi. North Carolina's Denise O'Sullivan scored an 89th minute goal to lift the Courage over the Red Stars 1-0. In the other semifinal is Portland Thorns against Orlando Pride and Marta in her first year. Portland ended up winning 4-1 over Orlando. The Thorns got off to a quick 2-0 lead in just the 15th minutes. Amadine Henry and Emily Sonnet scoring each of those goals for the Thorns. And then Orlando got one back by Alana Kennedy in the 23rd minute. And then in the second half, in the 71st minute, it was Portland Thorns' Haley Rosso, and 82nd minute, Christine Sinclair that gave the Thorns a 4-1 win over Orlando. And that leads us to the championship that took place in Orlando, Saturday, October 14th at 4:30 p.m. North Carolina against Portland. Sandra, take us through North Carolina Courage's lineup for that 2017 final.
Happily. There's a lot of familiar faces here, but they had Caitlin Rowland in net, Abby Urseg, Jalen Hinkle, Taylor Smith, Abby Dahlkemper, McCall Zerboni, Sam Mewis, Denise O'Sullivan, Kristen Hamilton, Ashley Hatch, and Lynn Williams. A big chunk of that North Carolina Courage team, the locker room of the Flash that we see here in this starting lineup, coached by Paul Riley at the time. Unused subs during this game were Sam Whitman, Sabrina D'Angelo, Meredith Speck, and Nora Holstead. But I think something really cool to note here is this is a big chunk of that locker room from 2016 that we see carry over to 2017 with a sprinkling of some new additions that really kind of emerge as what we are going to see as these typical starters for North Carolina Courage. Denise O'Sullivan that gets acquired kind of off waivers from Houston Dash, Crystal Hamilton as a lethal weapon, a rookie Ashley Hatch. It's very cool to see. And we get to see Abby Urseg kind of really be that center back for this team. And when we compare finals, we didn't see this prototypical box midfield, which we will see moving forward. We saw an Abby Urseg in a defensive mid kind of role, but now alongside Dahlkemper, they are the center back duo moving forward.
You gave a shout out to Ashley Hatch. She was a rookie this year with North Carolina Courage, the number 2 overall draft pick out of BYU, also in that draft class, and not necessarily available off the bench due to injury, but our very own Darian Jenkins out of UCLA. She was drafted in the first round, number 7 overall ultimately, but she went to North Carolina Courage. She had a pretty gnarly ankle injury, so she was unavailable to play in this game and this season, but she was there. She was on this team for North Carolina. Ultimately, for Portland Thorns, should I take you through their lineup? So in goal, they had A.D. Franch. Across the back line was Megan Klingenberg, Emily Menges, Emily Sonnet, and then Catherine Reynolds, Ashley Skies, Amadine Henri, Lindsay Horan, Tobin Heath, Haley Rosso, and Christine Sinclair. This 2017 Thorns side led by Mark Parsons. And this, Sandra, I mean, familiar names here for the Thorns as well. Incredibly familiar.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even to the unused subs, like I think of Britt Eckerstrom, who manned the net for Portland for a little while. Like Tyler Lucy was an unused sub for the Thorns in this match. Celeste Bouret, like this is a ton. Like Mallory Weber, it's just like this is part of the fun in reliving these finals and going down that YouTube time machine where we get to take a look at these. And I mean, that Portland Thorns back line, man. Shout out to Reynolds for sure. This is like, one of the pioneers of the Thorns with Menges, Sonnet, and Klingenberg. There's a reason why they had such really good defensive performances, I think, at this time, when you take a look at those players in the back line. But I think one that really sticks out maybe for a lot of people amongst these superstar-like names is maybe Amandine Henri as well, I think.
Yeah, Portland Thorns that year, they had 37 goals for and only 20 goals against defensively. They were the best defense in the league in the NWSL, the stingiest defense that they had. Referees, Danielle Chesney, who is still reffing. She was reffing this past weekend. She'll be as a center referee coming up. She was very much involved in the NWSL. Adrian McDonald was an assistant referee along with Corey Richardson. And the fourth official, Sandra, another familiar name that we have, Christina Uncle. She is no longer an active referee, but she's a rules analyst and one of our coworkers at CBS Sports. Maybe we'll have a bone to pick with Christina Uncle once we talk about it. But this game got started hard and fast, I'm going to say, because tough tackles right from the get. It was chippy. Sandra, what do you remember about the 90-minute span, or at least the opening 45 between Portland and North Carolina in 2017?
My goodness, I hate to narrow it down to one specific moment, but we're talking less than 5 minutes into this game. Taylor Smith and Tobin Heath come together. That's that first loud smack of a challenge, I think, that I hear on the sidelines, and it affects the game moving forward. 100%. Taylor Smith ends up having to come out of the game. Again, like you mentioned, not a lot of cautions that are given into this game or, yellows, and it affects it. With such a choppy, chippy physical game, it almost sort of felt like there was a constant reset of this game as far as tempo. Never really felt like in that opening half that anyone kind of set their game up. And we saw that continue really through the second half as well. There's a reason why this one comes down to one moment, one shot, one chance, and it goes the way of Portland. Even though Sam Mewis also had a really good chance, catches AD Franch off her line, tries a shot from the halfway line, hits off the bar. So there's some good moments in this game, but again, that physicality is what sticks out the most for me.
If you were to look at just the stats from this entire 90-minute game, North Carolina
So
dominated with
Yes.
16 shots, 5 of them on target. Portland only had 4 shots in the entire game, but
Yep.
the goal comes in the second half. The 50th minute strike from Lindsey Horan ends up being the game winner. It comes on a set piece service for the Thorns. The ball is kind of bounced into the box. I believe it's Amadine Henry who gets a little flick of it. Emily Sonnet ultimately gets credited with the assist, and Lindsey Horan is absolutely wide open on the back post. And that is questionable defending by North Carolina, hands down, when you rewatch this goal. But Lindsey Horan ends up with the game-winning strike, and ultimately the Portland midfielder is named the MVP of the match. How important was Lindsey Horan for the Thorns during this 90-minute game, Sandra? Not just the whole season, but like specifically in this final.
Yeah, massive. I think this is a player at the time who was just in her second year with NWSL and with the Thorns. There's a lot of promise around Lindsey Horan, a lot of chatter about how she went pro early and played in France, and now she was back in the United States with arguably the premier team of NWSL. So I think that within itself presented some challenges. How do you make yourself stand out on a team full of so many stars? And we saw in varying moments of this season how she became sort of an early threat on set pieces, whether it was in the air with her head, or honestly losing her defenders and marks and her movement off of those set pieces as well. And the way that she could function as either a string puller or someone to kind of control the ball and set up as well. So I think we see the progression from year 1 to year 2, I think in this final, in the playoffs and in this final specifically.
After the game, Portland defender Megan Klingenberg, she had some funny post-game comments, as did North Carolina midfielder McCall Zerboni. But for Portland's Klingenberg, she said, quote, "That was probably the ugliest soccer game I have ever played in." And meanwhile, for Zerboni, the North Carolina midfielder, she said the rules of the game are such that you want the referee to get control of the game, to hold on to the game. That's what they're there for. Otherwise, we would just take them out and be balls to the walls. I thought she did her job. I thought some things could have been changed and gotten control of the game earlier with maybe a couple of cards shown. I thought there were a couple of tackles that maybe could have been a red card. Honestly, it was clear what their game plan was. So shots fired from Zerboni post-match from North Carolina saying, hey, Portland just wanted to, crunchly tackle us.
Yeah. I think this is like we also the other thing we see, I think, coming out of this final is we see like the fully confirmed like rivalry that continues between these two squads, because again, even though it's a different name and a different city, that locker room had just faced this Portland Thorns side in the 2016 semifinal. So here they are going head to head in a 2017 championship, going from semifinal to championship. And then we start to see these two teams go at it throughout some other phases of different seasons and different championships finals. So I think the physicality between this kind of just confirms and cements that. We also see a really great turnout for Portland Thorns support. There's massive chants going on, some of them like really kind of like cruel and vulgar, and I'm like here for that kind of stuff. And that's something that I remember coming out of post-game media responsibility, is some of the players being asked about that. Christine Sinclair having a really good quote out of the mix zone, kind of alluding to the fact that she's been playing this game for a long time, and she remembers big games where maybe it was too quiet and maybe there wasn't enough of that support. So whether it's the opposing supporters who are saying booing her, or her hometown supporters booing the others, that she's actually happy to hear that type of stuff in the stands.
This is when we're starting to get the lore of
Yep.
NWSL truly begin, because there's been enough history with the previous handful of seasons that you have these villains, you have these heroes a little bit, and you have the rivalries, and the
Yeah.
fan base is really starting to come out of their shells and make themselves known.
Oh,
Portland
yeah.
Thorns get the 1-0 win in the 2017 NWSL Championship over North Carolina Courage. The Thorns lift their second NWSL trophy, the first one coming in the inaugural season in 2013. And North Carolina, the runners-up, the Shield winners, ultimately, don't worry, they'll get their revenge. Stick around for next week when we talk about that. But the evolution of the celebrations and the trophy lift, we got to see a little bit more
Pomp
celebration,
and
Sandra.
circumstance. Yeah.
Yeah, we did. Finally. Was it different
Yeah.
compared to 2016 being at the stadium, Sandra?
Yeah, it was. I still think that there was a little bit of that concern about how, hey, we're fine. We're in these years where it's going to be a neutral site. There's supposed to be some benefits to that, where you have build up to an event, where you can push for ticket sales, where you can create a big event. So the fact that this kind of comes in around under 10K for some folks are like, they maybe felt that was a little bit of a disappointment, even though like many thousands of
Womp,
people
womp,
is
womp.
also pretty good. But I will say I do also remember that for a lot of Orlando Pride fans, their team didn't make it to the final. And I remember being in Orlando, and this was not to bring up more bad memories, but this was also during the time of World Cup qualifiers, and the U.S. men had failed to qualify against Trinidad and Tobago. And I remember being in a bar watching this soccer game and being asked from locals, like, hey, where are you from? And they saw us equally devastated for the U.S. men at the time. And we had mentioned that we were in town for the NWSL Championship Final. And some of these locals saying, like, yeah, we would have loved to have gone if our team went. And they ended up reselling tickets for fans
Wow.
to go. So there's like a little, like, there's layers that I are getting introduced here as we're looking at like finals getting held in neutral sites. So it's like the building blocks, like we're starting to see them, like you say, we're seeing these fine margins of like pomp and circumstance come into play. It's still neutral sites. You still want to give that build up for ticket sales. You want to have supporter sections, for dueling supporters to bring that atmosphere. And of course, for the winners, you want to have a banner. You want to have a stage. You want to have one where they're not holding it up themselves. And we start to see just a little bit of that improving in this Orlando site.